Hello and mabuhay. My name is Marian Palencia, and our group will discuss Chapter 5 Leadership and Educational Organization. For our introduction, educational leadership is a collaborative process that unites the talents and forces of teachers, students, and parents. So, the goal of educational leadership is to improve the quality of education and the education system itself. The primary purpose of educational leadership is to ensure academic success through process, materials, and training improvements. This is mainly accomplished through collaboration with different individuals such as educators, parents, students, public policy makers, and the public. From a business perspective, educational leadership is a form of academic management and quality control. For the nature of leadership, leaders and their leadership skills play an important role in the growth of any organization. Leadership refers to the process of influencing the behavior of people in a manner that they strive willingly and enthusiastically toward the achievement of group objectives. And at this point, let us learn about the seven elements of leadership and why they are important to building trust between colleagues. And these are the crucial elements of effective leadership, and that includes purpose, trust, focus, leverage, feedback, change, and sustainability. That education leaders can overcome the many challenges they face in their profession and learn the skills and characteristics they need to succeed. So, the first elements of effective leadership in education, according to Douglas Reeves, is the purpose. Here, Reeves look at mission and vision statement and ask leaders to think deeply about the school's purpose. He maintains that it will be hard to attain and or maintain success unless leaders can quickly and succinctly state their purpose. Further, leaders must feel passion for the purpose and work to spread that purpose like wildfire. The counterexample here comes from what Reeves thinks of as the wordy yet hollow mission statements on the banners of most school websites. The next element is trust. Leaders must say what they mean what they say, and follow through with promises. Reeves explained that once trust is broken, leadership for sustained and positive change becomes nearly impossible. Similarly, to develop trust, leaders must do something which may seem counterintuitive. They must, for example, admit to and apologize for mistakes and be willing to respectfully and kindly confront personnel to discuss needed changes. The next element is focus. Schools that are successfully know their vision, align it to goals, and only think about, talk about, and act on work that is focused on meeting those goals. Reeves reminds leaders to weed your education garden, a powerful metaphor for keeping priorities aligned and not getting caught up in shiny new programs or tools that might take our eyes off the goal. The fourth element of effective leadership in education, according to Douglas Reeves, is leverage. This element is concerned with how and why to choose strategies that focus work in the way that will be most impactful. Reeves says that quite often the why is clear, but the how is somewhat less so. Figuring out what strategy is the best for meeting goals depends on watchfulness and a willingness to read the school result data objectively. The next elements of effective leadership in education is feedback. Leaders who succeed use feedback that is fast, which means fair, accurate, specific, and timely. Reeves argues that feedback is an essential part of a leader's work and that it must be prompt, instructionally focused, and ongoing. The next element of effective leadership in education is change. Here, Reeves examined the idea that leaders must be willing to embrace change, even though it can be hard, messy, and sometimes scary. He says that change in organizations is essential, but that it must be focused change, guided by purpose, and designed to enhance trust. And here is the seventh elements of effective leadership in education from leading to succeeding, and that is Sustainability. This last element examines the need for capacity building such that change sticks even as leaders come and go. Reeves wrapped this element back to the other six in the change that is sustainable is change that is built on purpose, trust, focus, strong leverage points, and continuing feedback pattern. And to end my topic about the nature and elements of leadership, I would like to leave you the quote from Douglas Reeves. There is no formula to protect you from frustration, exhaustion, and occasional fits of despair. The antidote, however, is hope.
Hi everyone, this is Janet, and I will be reporting on the different types of leadership. The types of leadership on the first slide: structural, participative, servant and freedom, and transformational. These are already been discussed in one of the resources provided to us by Dr. Amihan. So you can just go to Blue Book and you'll see a YouTube video there. And also, there are um, an overview of Dr. Amihan that he made in another resource reference that he provided to us. So the next slide, these are the types of leadership that I will be talking about and explaining in details. So let's start with managerial leadership. Now, managerial leadership is a type of leadership most closely related to formal models. Now, there are different types of models, six models to be specific. And in each of the types of leadership, I'll talk about all these different models as well. Now, managerial from the term itself is a type of leadership that assumes that the focus of leaders ought to be on functions, tasks, and behaviors, and that if these functions are carried out competently, the work of others in the organization will be facilitated. Most approaches to managerial leadership also assume that the behavior of organizational members is largely rational. And also, as a manager of an educational setting, which would be the head of the school or the principal, uh, they they are what we call at the apex of the pyramid. So there are different limitations or disadvantages of this kind of leadership. And as I've said, managerial leadership is under formal models, and these are the following limitations of formal models. It may be unrealistic to characterize schools and colleges as a goal-oriented organizations. That's the first one. The portrayal of decision making as a rational process is fraught with difficulties. Formal models focus on the organization as an entity and ignore or underestimate the contribution of individuals. Since, for number three, since the principal or the head of school is the major uh, decision making of all the different aspects of running the school or an organization, they usually ignore the other stakeholders in terms of making decisions. Now, number four is already explained. The formal model is that the power resides at the apex of the pyramid. And number five, formal approaches are based on the implicit assumption that the organizations are relatively available. Now, the opposite of formal model is what we call the collegial models. Now, here, collegial models include all those theories that emphasize that the power and decision making should be shared among some of all or all the members of the organization. Now, remember in formal models, the principal or head of the school is the uh, main source of decision making. In collegial models, it's the opposite. There are stakeholders involved and all the other members involved in making decisions. Collegial assume that organizations determine the policy and make decisions through a process of discussion leading to consensus. So they vote. However, since the power is shared, it takes a long time to get into a consensus sometimes, which is one of the negative things with collegial models. Now, what are the other features of collegial models? They are strongly normative in orientation. Second, collegial models seem to be particularly appropriate for organizations such as schools and colleges that have significant numbers of professional staff. So, usually, these are large schools, or what we call, there are different branches of schools, can be universities, can be colleges as well. Collegial models assume a common set of values held by members of the organization. Fourth one, the size of decision making group is an important element of collegial management. And the fifth one, collegial models assume that the decisions are reached by a consensus, as I've said before. Next, the third type, sorry, the second type of leadership is participative leadership. Now, here it's a normative model, which is this is an example of a collegial model. Assumes that the decision making process of the group ought to be the central focus of the group, and there are three participative leadership criteria. First, participative will increase school effectiveness. Second, participation is justified by democratic principles. Third, leadership is potentially available to any legitimate stakeholder. There are limitations, though, of collegial models. First, the collegial models are strongly normative and they tend to obscure rather than portray reality. Second, collegial approaches to decision making tend to be slow and cumbersome since they have to reach in a certain consensus. The voting is a bit of tiresome, which means you have to go back to step one if they don't reach the consensus of the organization. A fundamental assumption of democratic model is that decisions are reached by, because as I've said earlier, the fourth, collegial models must be evaluated in relation to the special features of educational institutions, which means every after certain decision making, every after reaching a consensus, they need to evaluate how the process went about. If 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 the same process is something they would have to do again, and they need to make changes if there are a lot of negatives behind it. Fifth, collegial approaches to school and college decision making may be difficult to sustain because principals remain accountable to various external groups, which is very true. Even if they have committees in certain collegial or yeah, in a collegial model or certain organization, I mean, it's still pretty much the principal would be the main decision making of the entire organization. Six, effectiveness of a collegial model or collegial system depends in part on the attitudes of the staff, which is very true since, if they don't like certain members of the committee, well, they might not vote two or four in certain types of decision making. Seven, collegial processes in schools depend even more on the attitudes of principals than on the support of teachers, which is very true as well, and it's related to number six. Next, now we have what we call transactional leadership, which is very well known in politics. This leadership model closely aligned to political models. Transactional leadership is leadership in which relationships with teachers are based upon exchange for some valued resources. This exchange process is an established political strategy. As we noted earlier, principals hold power through key rewards such as promotion and references. However, they require cooperation to secure the school's effectiveness or management. Transactional leadership does not produce a long term commitment to the values and vision promoted by school leaders. Now, transactional leadership, as I've said, is a type of a political model, and it's very controversial as well. Political models embrace those theories that characterize decision making as a bargaining process, and it's very questionable. The analysis focuses on the distribution of power and influence in organization and on the bargaining and negotiation between interested groups. If you're familiar with the political management in the Philippines, in Australia, or in the US, it's very common. This is what we call uh, transactional leadership, and we know as well that this kind of leadership is a bit biased. Let's face that it's very biased since the head of the organization, they have to bargain with stakeholders or with certain members of the institution, then it's like a give or take. If one will not give, the other one will not forgive. Some things are fair. Some things, well, life is not really fair, to be honest with you. Next, transactional leadership does not produce a long-term commitment to the values and vision promoted by school leaders. For political models, this is what we call, the analysis focuses on the distribution of power and influence in the organization on the bargaining negotiation with interested groups. Now, what are the features of political models? First, they tend to focus on group activity rather than the institution as a whole. Second, political models are concerned with interests and interest groups. Political models stress the prevalence of conflict in organizations. Political models assume that the goals of organizations are unstable, ambiguous, and contested. Individuals, interest groups, and coalitions have their own purpose and act towards their achievement. Fifth, as noted above, decisions within the political arenas emerge after a complex process of bargaining and negotiation. And the sixth, the concept of power is central to all political theories. So, with regards to the features, on the other hand, the limitations are the following. Political models are immersed so strongly in the language of power, conflict, and manipulation that they neglect on the other standard aspect of the organizations. First one is very obvious. It's a bit of being greedy in a way. Like, the more power you have, the more influential you are. So that is one of the, I guess, the advantage and as well as the disadvantage of political models for some for all the obvious reasons. Second, political models stress the influence of interest groups on decision making. Third, in political models, there's too much emphasis on conflict and a neglect of the possibility of professional collaboration leading to agreed outcomes. Fourth, political models are regarded primarily as descriptive or explanatory theories. Next leadership is the postmodern. Now, this one is subjective theorist that they prefers to stress the personal qualities of individuals rather than their official positions in the organization. The subjective view is that leadership is a product of personal qualities and skills and not simply an automatic outcome of official authority, which is the opposite of political models or transactional leadership. Let me tell you let me tell you now about the contingent leadership. Now, contingent leadership, in a climate of ambiguity, traditional notions of leadership require a modification, and contingent model provides an alternative approach, recognizing the diverse nature of school context and the advantages of adapting leadership styles to the particular situation rather than adopting a one size fits all stance. Now, contingent leadership is under ambiguity model, which is has something to do with that some important dimensions to the theory of educational management and the concepts of problematic goals, unclear technology, fluid participation are significant contributions to organizational analysis. The next one is what we call moral leadership. Leaders have the main responsibility for generating and sustaining culture and communicating core values and beliefs both within the organization and to external stakeholders. The leadership model closely linked to organizational culture is that of moral leadership. So, this is what we call, well, it has its word moral. So the values in terms of the organization has something to do with this kind of leadership. Now, moral leadership is consistent with organizational culture in that it is based on the values, beliefs, and attitudes of principals and the educational leaders. It focuses on the moral purpose of education and on the behaviors to be expected of leaders operating within the moral domain. Now, comparing the different types of models, I've said before, we have formal models, collegial models, We also have ambiguity model, cultural model, and we also have political and collegial. Did I mention that already? And political. Yes, so those six. So we have formal, collegial, political, subjective, ambiguity, and cultural. No, I haven't really talked about. I've talked about formal and collegial models. No, I haven't really talked about ambiguity and cultural model in detail. Now, ambiguity model, the increasing complexity of the educational context, may appear to lend support to the ambiguity model with its emphasis on turbulence and anarchy. However, this approach provides a few guidelines for managerial action and leads to the view that there has to be a better way. Now, cultural model, on the other hand, is that cultural models stress on values and beliefs, and the subjective theories emphasize emphasis on the significance of individual meanings also appear to be both plausible and ethical. In practice, however, this may lead to manipulation as leaders seek to impose their own values on schools and colleges. So that's the disadvantage of cultural model, because there are some leaders, they want to make sure that their own values are heard, and most of the time they 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 impose, they make sure that their values and morals are the ones being presented. What else? Now, I've talked about uh subjective model, whereas the source of individuals' meanings is the main area, but it can be problematic because it's perceived as a form of control. And a postmodern is the type of leadership under subjective. The cultural, okay, on the last slide, it will talk about, it's like a summary of what models. So, one, we have six models, and then there are what we call six types of leaderships under it. And you'll see this table will be very useful to understand exactly the different types of leadership, different models, and what they imply.